Hi, I'm Cissie Lynch. Welcome to Fearless, helping you have a fearless faith in a compromising culture. So recently, I was just in Albuquerque, New Mexico with Skip and Lynch and speaking at Calvary Church. And Skip was doing this series called Hunting Giants. And there's a panel to talk about, fighting for truth, defending for truth, and a very hostile culture that we are seeing and living in. And Skip had asked me this question about defending truth. Are we ever scared? Are we ever nervous? And I gave an answer that said, no, I'm never really nervous. I'm never scared of the cancel culture coming after me. And one, that's just because maybe the bloodline. I have that example of my father who set that before me. But the truth is that I just have to deal with cancel culture on a social media. They don't come face to face with it. And what somebody says behind a keyboard never bothers me. Somebody that doesn't know me, that's not hurtful. But in the next service, I wanted to clarify, because my dad always taught me never to be judgmental of those who don't stand fearless, because it's not my livelihood that's on the line. It's not my children's lives that are on the line and stuff like that. And so when I was there, God just really convicted me to make that clear as a message while I was in Albuquerque. But later in my stay in Albuquerque, I got to meet this wonderful couple that has faced cancel culture, that cancel culture has viciously come after them. And I remember seeing Chad and Bree Barela the first time in the church service, because you would know if you saw them. And here on the video, Chad has this smile that stretches ear to ear and these long, beautiful locks as he was walking into church. And we didn't even meet, but I remember seeing this couple. And they walked into church with just joy, just this inner joy in both of them. And later I got to know their story. And I am thankful that they are taking the time, that they have joined me here on Fearless to share their story of how they have stood fearlessly in this world and this culture that we're facing. Bree and Chad, welcome to Fearless.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's an honor.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. And both of you that I met, as I just said, in Albuquerque, I got to come to your business. Both of you have a small business. And we're going to get into that and what this last year has looked. But before we get started, tell me a little more about, and those who are listening, about Bree and Chad. Tell us about your life, how the two of you met. You got two beautiful children. Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
It's been a long journey. My uncle was a pastor here in town, and her dad was a pastor, and he actually helped Skip and Lenya in the early days with Calvary. And when I met Bree was when her dad started attending my uncle's church. And
I was 10.
It was really early. And her
not
brother,
even high school sweethearts. This is like elementary sweethearts.
But we weren't like crushing on each other then. She was real good friends with my cousin, and I would skate with her brother. And it wasn't until about when I was 19 that we kind of started crushing on each other. And so I'm 2 years older than her. She was 17. And we started going to church services together, and we started dating shortly after, and we dated for about a year and a half-ish. And then I made the bad decision, and I up and left to Thailand and broke up with her, and it was this terrible situation. And then we had a 4 or 5 year stint of not dating, but still kind of going back and forth anyway. So I moved to Nashville to pursue music. And when I was there, I ended up coming back from my sister's wedding. And I remember very vividly, my dad he said, why don't you go dance with Bree? And at the time I was dating someone else. And I said, Dad, and he knew, but he always loved her. And anyway, so we actually started talking the day I got back. I ended up breaking up with my girlfriend. Since then, we've been dating, and then we got married about a year after that. And then we moved back to Albuquerque and started a business. I was making jewelry at the time in Nashville, brought that back here. She started a hair salon when we got back here with her business partner. And so those are our two businesses. She's got a hair salon, and then I have a Southwest Heritage jewelry business.
And you have two children. How old are they?
Arlo, he's 3 years old. And then Scout, she's about 18 months, right around there.
And they're absolutely beautiful. They're the most beautiful children. So you moved back, both of you have small businesses, you moved back to your hometown, and tell us a little bit of what life was like that as you started these two small businesses, what life was like for you and the community there in Albuquerque.
I would say I never really wanted to go to Nashville in the first place, but went because he was just not done with it. So even us coming back to Albuquerque was kind of a miracle, and it was absolutely the Lord changing Chad's heart. But part of what made me want to come home is because having been in the Bible Belt, it was a little bit difficult to make genuine connections with other Christians. Everyone's a Christian, you know.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and everyone's so transient there, and so I was just having a really hard time forming good connections and community there. So anyways, when we came back to Albuquerque, that's what we expected to return to. A lot of friends and community that were on the same page as us and that we could look to and depend on and grow with. And that ended up not being the case at all. So although I didn't know if it was called this yet or not, but where the progressive Christian thing started coming in, and where just plainly politics started influencing faith versus faith influencing politics. So we came back and were totally shocked that this community we thought we had to come home to really didn't exist in that same way anymore. So we were bummed and confused and lonely and not sure what to do. Chad was continuing his jewelry business. I was working at a different hair salon at the time. My business partner and friend, Brittany, she and her husband hadn't moved back from LA yet. So we were just kind of going through the motions, and it was a difficult season, I would say.
We moved back in the election season of 2016. And so it was obviously a very crazy time, a bunch of politics and just ideological confusion, but that was also making its way into the church.
But you guys were involved locally with the small business, small businesses, I think, in these kind of communities, like urban communities, they really are a strong network. And y'all were a part of that network, correct? Just, you'd open up your hair salon and people were coming in and...
Yeah, that was, I guess, like the next step. So then once my business partner, Brittany, moved back, then we opened up towns, and Chad was working from our garage. And so he just was kind of a hermit and was able to just do his thing. And most of his clientele wasn't in New Mexico and all that. Once Brittany and I opened up towns, yes, absolutely. There is a very tight-knit, or was a very tight-knit creative community that some was Christian, some was not.
Towns is her hair salon, is Bree's hair salon. So I didn't clarify that. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
We were trying to start what you see in a lot of these newer growing cities, things that I saw in Nashville that I really wanted to, kind of build here locally. I mean, that's my dream, is to have the vibrant, successful, prosperous city and turn my hometown into that type of city.
With a lot of collaborations and working together with other creatives or with other businesses and see how we can help each other grow.
Yeah, building culture. And so, after we established towns, I then started working out of towns. This was, I think, 2018, maybe 2019, actually. Either way, we started integrating these things. We started inviting businesses to do events at our shop, and it was very cross-collaborative. So we were very, very involved, and it was quite united, regardless of maybe Christian or non-Christian differences.
Yeah, so that's 2018, 2019, you have new businesses. And of course, 2020 hits. And 2020 was a difficult year for so many people on many different levels, and especially for this country. When COVID hit, and then you had the protests in the summer of Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. Tell us a little bit about that year and how it's changed your life a little bit, and how the cancel culture came after you.
And actually, if I could start and then she'll finish, because our daughter Scout had yet to be born. It was just before she was born. She was born May 31st. And I want to mention that I was praying for resilience. Now, I hadn't talked to her or gotten...
Got to be careful what you pray for.
I know. But I was feeling this conviction, really, of being very quiet. I feel like to whom much is given, much is required. And I feel like God has given me much in life. And I was kind of just going about my comforts, having just gone through hardships. I just felt like this is not right. I need to be honest and fearless in a fallen world type of thing. And so I was praying for resilience. And just days later, Scout's born. We're in the hospital. There's riots going on. I believe one was going on in Albuquerque when we were in the hospital. And she's born. And I remember it was the most bittersweet moment of my life. Because it sucks, because you want to look back and think, it's my daughter's birth, and here I am, having to bring her into all this stuff. And I was bitter, I was angry, I was frightened. And so we're in the hospital. It was a really kind of hard period. And then we started seeing on Instagram on Tuesday, there was that campaign called Blackout Tuesday, I think it was. And so pretty much everybody's posting a black square to stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And at the time it was, forbidden to criticize the organization, of course. And I said, we're going to get in trouble if we don't post this. And I said, I'm not posting that. And so we, agreed, and we said we weren't going to. And so we didn't. And then, a couple of weeks later, some local people in the business world came commenting on some of our posts saying, hey, you guys didn't, make a statement. You guys didn't post a black square. Where do you stand? Silence is violence, and white silence is violence, and there's all this stuff. And so we had a meeting with our team, and I kind of said, no, my conscience does not permit me to participate in this whatsoever. And so we had this conversation because, at the time, a lot of people didn't really understand what was going on. The political aspects behind the group itself.
We did end up having a meeting with our team, and obviously the words that Black Lives Matter, that is the truth. Of course, that's the truth. And we tried to make it really clear our perspective and just saying, look, there's an organization. It's like the ideology was somewhat of a wolf in sheep's clothing, but yes, of course, the people matter, but we were trying to express why participating in this cultural movement was not something that aligned with our consciences.
And people just have such a hard time understanding that. And so to them, it was proof that we're racist.
Which is funny. I know we're on a podcast, but Chad, you're not white.
No, my last name is Barela. I am New Mexican. I mean, my family, my roots are pretty far back here.
But that just shows the absurdity of it all.
Now, of course, the violence that was happening was being portrayed not as violence through legacy media outlets. And so it was just this disparity between the truth and this. Anyway, so it was a confusing time nonetheless. And so we said, no, I can't participate in that. When we tried to compromise with the hair salon, and that didn't do anything. It's 100% with us or you're 100% against us type of thing. And so we never said the words. We never posted the black square. And they went after towns first, denounced towns.
When he says you compromised with towns, we did try to not really make a statement, but okay, is there anything that we can do to love our neighbor and to love our community and to not appease the mob necessarily, but like if someone, is there a way for us to love our neighbor, I guess, most simply put. And so we had our team photo and we're like, you know what, we are going to pursue diversifying our hair education and see if we can feel more comfortable for people of all races to come to, and when you do hair, it's really, really common and normal to have a specialty, and not everyone knows how to do every single hair type. And so it was difficult because they're like, it's not wrong of us to not be really great at this, but maybe we expand our product line or anything like that. So,
well, at the time though, too, it ought to be noted that our lead stylist was Black.
We did try to make that effort, but that was really when that post initially, it was like, great, awesome, like a few comments of support or whatever. And then a few days later, when the supportive people would have moved on to the next post or whatever, then other people from the community came back and were like, why didn't you hashtag BLM? Why didn't you capitalize the word Black? Why didn't you so now you're just a white Christian. They called Christian companies pretty companies or pretty businesses. So it was, we're now white Christian pretty businesses that are trying to now exploit Black people, and how could we do that, and what organizations are we going to donate to, like all of this attack that just came and came and came. And so
they went after Towns, but then they relented with Towns, and they knew that I was a partner of Towns, and that, you know, we might have been the source of the resistance. And so they went to my business, and they said, "Oh, he makes Southwest jewelry. He's not allowed to make that. He's a white man profiting off of exploiting indigenous, and that is an act of colonization and genocide against the indigenous." And so it was just this, whoa, I've never heard anything of the sort before now. And so that happened. So then they started going mean. Those campaigns, by the way, for most people that don't know, they tend to last about 2 weeks of canceling, in effort to like ruin you, get you fired, or, you know, get you to give up. And so it was about 2 weeks for Towns, and then they decided, oh, let's go to Chad. So it was like a prolonged period of canceling.
And so a lot of people didn't make the connection that Chad's technically a co-owner of Towns. So they would message Towns and say, "Don't carry this guy's stuff." And we're like, "That's my husband."
Yeah, you guys have had friends that were even canceled because they carried your jewelry in their stores.
Yes. Other business friends who stuck their neck out to defend us were threatened to be protests outside their home, and, you know, violence waged against them. We got death threats in that period of time. The campaign was mainly disassociate, denounce these people as people, denounce their business as a business, boycott them, protest them. And so they said, vote with your dollars, not your fists. And so that kind of like calmed it a little bit. And then they found a photo of my wife and I wearing MAGA hats in 2017, which got us in a lot more trouble.
They're relentless. And I know the story of Jack Phillips, baker out of Colorado.
Yeah.
And he talks about from the moment, it wasn't that he, and I won't, for the time's sake, I won't go into his whole story. A lot of our listeners know that story, but there were a lot of cakes throughout his career that he wouldn't make, right? It wasn't like he doesn't even make Halloween cakes because he doesn't believe in Halloween. And he had served this couple a same-sex marriage. They had a wedding coming up, and he just said, you know, he had served them other things, but I don't want to participate in the wedding cake. But in that moment, the relentless attacks that came, it was like it was so well organized, right? They have a whole network. It's like they send out emails to everybody, start going after this guy. Because he said the emails were timed, right? They came like every, I can't remember the story now, 2 or 5 minutes for weeks and weeks, the phone calls that were just relentless picking up. So they're so well organized and orchestrated to go after and cancel businesses and families and individuals like yourself who are loving. You're serving your community. You've loved your community, but you disagree with them on things, and they're so intolerant. And I do have a question in that moment, because I'm always amazed, you know, here on Fearless, I want to encourage people to have a fearless faith. Listeners know one of my favorite Bible verses is from Daniel chapter 11. It says, "Those who know their God will be able to stand in strength and take action to truly know him." But was there a moment in that when you have the death threats coming, and Bree, they broke your window at your salon how many times?
Well, so we don't know for certain that there was a connection, but our windows have been broken
7 times in the last 8 months.
I would say that's quite the coincidence.
Yeah.
So the window's been broken, you know, and you have 2 children. When I was there, your children are on the floor in your salon playing, and your livelihood, you have people that work underneath you. I mean, Chad, you're independent, you're for yourself, but for people that have businesses out there that have the livelihood of others underneath them and have their children, this is a hard decision to make. And was there a moment where y'all were thinking, this isn't worth it? Was there ever a moment of doubt, saying this isn't worth it, let's just do what they've asked?
I think for me, there wasn't a time where I said, maybe we should just do it. I felt strongly enough about that, but I did not stand fearless. I just want to make that really clear. I was, now I'm going to cry. I was like in the fetal position on the floor at times. You know, at this time was 2 weeks postpartum. And people they would say, you know, you need to talk some sense into your husband if you care about the future of your children. They would say that they're going to find him and break his hands, or, you know, there's just all these different things. And then, yeah, we do have wonderful friends and business partners, and we have wonderful friends and employees, that we had to take into consideration. And I just wanted to give our business partners, especially, some really big props for everything that they did too. I mean, they weren't maybe specifically as publicly bombarded, but man, they did some behind the scenes stuff and had these.
So many people did.
But right, so many people did, but they had these behind the scenes conversations, and they lost so many friends, and they took on a lot of weight themselves too.
It was a strange experience because, it felt like it was all our fault. Like we could do something. We could make the fire stop if we just relented.
Well, and we technically could have, and so that was definitely a hard thing to deal with the consequences and sit in the discomfort for so long. But we did know, and there were times when we tried to come up with a way. Like at one point from Towns, I did, at the request of the rest of the team, I did issue a statement where I tried to separate myself and say, hey, can you leave everyone else over here alone? Because Chad and I wore the MAGA hats, and we decided that we did not want to do this thing. So like, if you
took full responsibility for everything, and
we invited those messages to come to us and to leave the rest alone. But that's
not going to work.
That's not going to work. That's not what happened. And if they can punish people that are close to us and that are associated, then they can punish us more. And so yeah, it was definitely like, this discomfort is excruciating, and it's like, we could end this if we just posted the black square, and if we because the demand was that we apologize for wearing a hat or for not posting the square. But the thing is that sure, maybe would have been simple, but that bleeds out into so many other things, and ultimately the convictions that we hold. It couldn't have just been an easy fix without us having totally compromised or surrendered our beliefs and our faith ultimately.
So you lost a lot of friends, and I know that during that time you even had to switch churches, correct? Because you now go to Calvary Church under the leadership of Skip Isaac, who is a dear friend. Everybody knows I love Skip.
Yeah.
Very thankful for his wisdom. But why did y'all have to switch churches? Was there a moment, because you lost friends in the community? And not to attack, I always want to be gracious in our conversation. I always encourage people to stand for truth, but Jesus was 100% truth. He was 100% grace. And we live in a culture right now that is so divisive. Even Christians are doing stuff in malice. They go over the line. They're not doing it full of grace. And I've even struggled in the last couple of months of watching Christians and Christian conservatives, I think, cross the line and go a little too far. And we can stand fearless and we can stand with truth, but we're to always do it with grace. And I do love that about you. And I saw that, and we'll get into the story of where I saw you explaining that, but go back. I just wanted to clarify. I don't want to attack where you were going to church, but you had to switch because you lost friends in the community and even in the church. Why did you have to switch?
At the time, there was a couple of people that participated in the campaign to cancel us unwittingly to what degree it was affecting us. But it was an ideology. I mean, you see it with progressive Christianity, you see it with wokeness and all that stuff. It's not outside the church alone. It is inside the church. And so I saw it as a big problem. And so I brought it up with leadership, and I said, hey, is this something, we could address to hopefully find unity and agree, and my biggest scripture, one of my favorite scriptures always is 1 Corinthians 1:10. I strongly urge you, brethren, that you agree on all things, that way there may be no divisions among you. And that's exactly what was happening in our church, was we were divided. And I remember the feeling of going to church and thinking, do they hate me? Like, am I welcome here? And that shouldn't be the case when you're at church. You're the body of Christ. You should be brothers and sisters, you should love each other. And so anyway, I remember there was that feeling, and I was like, how do we resolve this in the most profitable, productive way? And so we kind of thought about it. We were in a community group with our pastors. Can we, talk about these things on a corporate level? Maybe not from the pulpit, because, that wasn't a pattern that was happening, which is one of the reasons we love Skip, is that he's very much so great at relating the gospel, the scriptures, to modern day, how to make it practical. So that's something I was really craving, especially at the time. I thought it was really necessary. However, when we brought those things up, it was pretty much just no. And it's really confusing and hard because the thing we heard time and time again was we're just going to stick to the gospel. And so I said, well, is there another forum that we can create? Can I host, or can I and a team of pastors host more of a culturally forward, gospel-centered forum, question and answer something? And it was pretty much just turned down. And so we decided that we were going to find a more bold leadership, more bold and engaged in culture church.
Let me just highlight that. I love, we've talked about that. I've had that question submitted to me many times. What do we do with our church that's beginning to welcome the woke culture and becoming more woke? And I've always said, I'm never for somebody just up and leaving their church. And you're always to do what's biblical. Go to the leadership, talk to them, pray with them, and give them some resources that might help them. I think in the culture that we are in, if that is something that they are even tolerating a little bit inside their church and sacrificing the truth, sacrificing a biblical justice over a social justice. And often do we need to find church. So I'm so thankful that you found a church at Calvary Church. I love them. Corey and I've often said, there's nothing like holding us down in the town that we live in, Fort Myers, Florida. I'm like, let's just move to Albuquerque for 6 months so we can go to Calvary Church. Y'all are blessed beyond imagination to be at such a good church.
We know. We absolutely know. We're so, so thankful. And we do have joy when we go there. When you mentioned you noticed the joy, it's like we we're excited to go.
Maybe in that moment, y'all thought it was coming. Let's go back to a little bit in your journey. You thought maybe all the pressure was coming off a little bit. Maybe life was getting back to normal. But I know just recently, Chad, you were working on a big order for a retailer that you were so excited about. And this is where I saw your grace. You extended grace to this retailer. And when you were telling me this story, that knowing that there wasn't probably malice behind them. But let's talk to us about it, because I do want to get talking about your jewelry and all the positive things that you guys are doing. But the journey didn't end. It kind of continued maybe for a little bit, and you got kind of hit back a little bit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think if you stick your neck out against the culture, you are unwelcome in certain areas. And that's by neutral parties and as well as hostile parties. But what I experienced with this retailer is I worked probably for a good 6 to 8 months on this big wholesale. It was going to be an ongoing wholesale order. So I was co-designing pieces and making a large quantity. And so we were working together for months, designing things. I put so much money, so much work into it. And a week prior to the official shipping date, they sent down their photographer, who's a friend of mine. He's a Christian brother. And so I'd shared with him the story. And he didn't know. I thought of it at the time. I was like, this is going to get me in trouble. But I shared with him. And what ended up happening is, I think it was the next day or the day following after he had gone back, I got a phone call from the creative director who I'd been working with for months. And he says, hey, I have a hard conversation. It's going to be a really hard conversation. We can't continue forward. And part of me had been preparing for a while for that potential outcome. Now, I left everything public. I'm not ashamed of what happened. In fact, I'm quite proud of not bowing. But everything's still on my Instagram. You can go back and see the comments and the vitriol. And I thought maybe they'd done their research and seen all of that. And so I thought, we're past that. They're fine working with me. It's not a big deal. But when I think that was brought to their attention, they decided they couldn't take the risk of it. And so they called me and said, hey, I know we, pretty much ordered 2 sets of jewelry, but we got to cancel this. So let me know how we can do that best. It's essentially how it happened. So I was crushed.
What's your conversation like that when you're in the car or in your studio, and when it's just you and God? What's that conversation? Because I know this is painful.
Yeah, I was very gracious with him on the phone when he told me. So I understand. I kept my composure and everything, and then I hung up and I knew I'm going to have to tell my wife, and I have to tell my mom, and tell everybody who I've been telling. I've been so stoked about this big order. And I think that's when I got sad, because I knew they were disappointed for me. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick up for myself. And so I ended up, negotiating with them and figuring out a fair exit of the situation, which is also why I think, I can still defend, some of their honor. and do so gracefully. But yeah, it's one of the greatest, and I'll still say this, they are one of the greatest shops, retail shops in America, in the world, I'd say. Most creative, beautiful, beautiful stuff. So it's a big letdown. Maybe, in the future, God shows redemption in other ways. And I think that he's already done that.
Bree, I know that's hard to watch. For you in that moment, is maybe just taking another, kind of punch to the stomach a little bit to say, what was that like for you to watch him through that?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. He had told me earlier I might have to stay a little bit late because I'm packaging everything and then it's all going out in the morning. And so I need to make sure everything's set. And so then he calls me and he goes, well, they canceled. And I was like, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. You're joking. This is a joke. And he's like, no, they canceled. I'm coming home. And I could just hear it in his voice. And I didn't know what to say. So we hung up, and I had both my kids, and that's always, man, trying to be a good example for your kids. Like my kids are really, really young, but again, like I said, I wanted to just go jump into bed and cry, but my kids are there with me. And so I'm like, what do I do? All I wanted was to hug him and find out how he's doing. And I just started praying and pretty much just wandered nervously around my house until Chad got home, just praying. And it was a pretty quiet afternoon for both of us to just deal with our disappointment. And I don't think that with all of this stuff have ever been like, why, God, or where are you? And why is this happening to us, or whatever. I think that we're very familiar.
We know the scriptures.
We know the scriptures,
well.
And we know that that we will endure times of trouble. But I wanted that win for him so bad. But it wasn't as if we got canceled and then just all this time goes by and then this thing randomly happened. Over that span in the middle, he'd get random messages of people saying, oh, I hope you die. And, just these different mean things. And I get very protective, defensive. I'm like, if I could just find these people, you're talking about the grace that Chad has. He does. I struggle with it.
You're the mama bear. You got to hold down the fort. Protect your
my clan, my family. I have my moments, but I struggle with all the things. And I guess I just keep having to reiterate that because I really appreciate, that you guys have done this fearlessly and you've been so gracious. I haven't. I've struggled a ton, and maybe I've landed in the right spot, but not anger with God, truly, honestly, but anger at the situation and seeing his disappointment and preoccupation with these things. And Chad is an honest, hardworking, good man, and I hate when someone comes after him like that, or where he doesn't get something that he deserves, because he does deserve good things,
Well, I think I shared before we got started, you two have had such a huge impact on me. And when I started this podcast, I wanted people to have a fearless faith in this compromising culture. And I had wonderful examples as parents for me. Not everybody has that wonderful example. Not everybody grew up in a godly home or knows the scriptures to be able to be their anchor. And I saw so many of my friends struggle with that in culture. So I just wanted this to be a place where we can look at scripture and we can look at what's happening in our culture and how do we stand fearless in it. But with all of that said, as I said earlier, how thankful I am for God's grace. Because you look at Peter, one of the best friends of Jesus, who denied his best friend 3 times beside that fire.
That's it.
And the guilt that came over him, but how beautiful it was that John continued, that John showed us that Jesus restored him and even gave him more. So for those who are listening, who maybe have not stood fearless in their schools or in their businesses throughout this crazy year or 2 years that we have faced, I just want that to be an encouragement to you, that go to the foot of the cross, how beautiful and how redemptive that the love of Jesus is. And I want to thank you guys for that, because like I said, I take punches on social media. People would come after me when I was in elementary school or high school because they didn't like dad, but so what? Those little things, personal, didn't bother me. I think maybe at a time in high school, I struggled with it just a little bit, not wanting to be a Graham, and we won't go into all of that. But now I know that there are couples like you, there are families like you, there are businesses like you that are on the front lines of culture, defending truth, and then defending it with grace. I just want to say thank you. And so let's end on a good note, shall we?
Yeah.
It's been heavy. I am wearing two of your original pieces right here that I love. One, my dad bought me. It's beautiful. And this is a piece I will treasure forever because of the story behind it. But tell us a little bit about your jewelry, a little bit why it makes it different. Because look, everybody's complaining right now that there's a supply chain problem. There is not a problem for Christmas, people. We can buy locally. We can support couples like this, like Bree and Chad, whether it's buy a gift card to hair salon or buy products from the hair salon, buy your family member or wife. He's even got men's jewelry. It's so cool, but so many cool pieces that are hand-me-downs. I think I look forward to one day that my little girl can have some of these pieces because these are pieces that will last a lifetime and more. So tell us a little bit about your jewelry.
My dad is a silversmith. He was in the jewelry business since I think the 70s. So my family has a pretty strong story within that sphere here in New Mexico. But yeah, he always had a workshop in our house. And so I remember being a little kid and I'd go in the garage and he had a little workshop and I just kind of sit there and he'd just quietly work and I just watch him. So it wasn't probably until about 2012 that he actually finally, I asked him, I said, hey, you should teach me. That's cool. I didn't realize it was cool until I was, like 20 years old, 20-something years old. And then finally taught me. I made a few copper rings. I was like, this is kind of fun. And so it actually involves our story quite a bit is that I was living in Nashville and I was coming back here because I wanted to propose. But I couldn't get a job here. But I also needed to make some money because I was only going to be here for a month. So I was like, well, I know how to make jewelry. Why don't I, put something out on social media and see if anyone's interested in me making them a custom piece. And so I did that. And I was very blown away with the response. And so while I was here for that month, I made a bunch of jewelry and then I proposed and then I started really falling in love with Albuquerque and the culture and a lot of different things. And so I started making. And so, at this point, I've got a shop here in West Downtown and I've been doing it full time for about 7 years. Yeah, I love the old stuff, the early 1900s, the heirloom jewelry.
That word came to me, heirloom, not hand-me-downs. Heirloom is what I meant to say. But the quality of Chad's work, the heaviness of it, the amount of silver. I don't know how to talk jewelry, but I just know the difference of the weight. If I put one piece of my turquoise in and then I put yours is quite heavier. This is the real deal. And I want to encourage people once again, this Christmas, support couples like Bree and Chad. Place an order with Chad. This is the best quality you will find. It'll be a piece of jewelry that the woman or the man in your family, because like I said, he's got men's jewelry. So I want to thank both of you. Like I said, you two will never know the impact you had in my life. And I've wanted to tell your story because you truly are. You're in the communities, you're in your corner of the world. And no matter where we are, each of us will have to make a decision. Are we going to stand for truth? And how God has convicted us in our own personal lives, wherever that is, whether that's in a school board room, whether that's in a courthouse or in our businesses or just in the four walls of our home. We're going to have to stand for truth or we will shrink back in fear that will lead us to unrighteousness. So I want to say thank you, Chad. Chad and Bree, I'm going to give you all the final word.
Well, I wanted to answer your question earlier as well. And you said if we get scared. And, definitely, I think courage is encouraged unless you have to overcome a degree of fear. And so that's what I was really wrestling with. And so I was going through all these things. And then I remember just sitting next to Bree and she looked over at me and she says, I feel like you're preparing to die. Mm. And I think the very Christian, the root of it is, I think we should all be willing to, Jesus says it, die to yourself daily, pick up your cross, follow me. And those things I want to own and know I'm with you, Lord. And so wrestle with those things. That's the most important thing you can wrestle with. Now we got to do it in every moment, in each decision we make. Yes. Mm-hmm. But like you said, I think, it's important for us to have grace on ourselves. Like Peter, he denied Christ 3 times. Could you imagine? And then he goes and watches him be crucified and he probably takes that responsibility. But Jesus redeems him. He says, Peter, do you love me? And he says, yes, Lord. He says, okay, go and feed my sheep. Mm. And he does. He goes and he's obedient unto death. And it's just it's a beautiful example for us to look at. And that means, that he who loves his life shall lose it. but he who loses his life for my sake shall gain it. And I think that principle has been what's carried me through this entire year. And
well, I said I was going to give you the last word, but you reminded me of something. Bree, I remember being in your shop and we came in, we were just there so quickly. And I always tell people that God will honor your obedience. He will honor it. So whoever's listening and you're struggling with that, God will honor it. Might not be in the ways that we see. Our windows might be bashed in. We might lose thousands of dollars and wonder how we're going to pay the next bill. But I promise you, he will honor you, whether it's with the next generation of your children, with your children's future, your children's health. Maybe it's not that. Maybe we don't even see how he's going to honor you until we're in heaven, right? But he will honor obedience. And so I want to thank you for that. Thank you for setting that example. Thank you in a crooked and depraved world that you shine like stars in the universe. It's like scripture says, you literally, both of you shine. I can remember running into both of you in church, and you can tell there's a joy in you, a joy that only comes from Jesus. So thank you. Thank you for standing fearless.
Thank you.
I hope Chad and Bree's story has been encouraging to you. Whether you have found yourself in the crosshairs of cancel culture, or maybe one day you will be, I hope you'll be reminded of their story. But also, I want to remind you, check out Chad's website for Christmas shopping. It's the most beautiful Southwestern jewelry you can find with the best quality. I will put his website in my show notes, but it's chadbarela.com. Thank you for joining me, Cissie Graham Lynch, on another episode of Fearless. To check out more episodes, check out CissieGrahamLynch.com. Once again, always helping you to have a fearless faith in a compromising culture.